what if I tell you that the patterns and performance we've seen under Joe Biden are actually very typical for the stock markets under the last presidents, be it Joe Biden, be it Donald Trump, or be it Barack Obama? This is due to something that I like to call the presidential election stock market pattern, and it helps me personally to time my investments into stocks and cryptocurrencies very well. So on this episode of The Good, the Bad and the Bitcoin, I want to show you how you can use this presidential election pattern also to invest with less headaches in cryptocurrencies and the stock markets. Stay tuned, I'm going to be back in 10 seconds. Welcome back. Good to see you, everybody. My name is Dirk Hartig. I've been a trader and investor for 25 years, and I have dedicated this channel to helping you to make better informed trading and investing decisions. If you enjoy content like this and it really helps you, why not leave me a like and subscribe to the channel? But now, without further ado, let's jump into the action and talk about the presidential election pattern. Now, the behavior under Joe Biden of the US stock markets was roughly like this. Right after the election, we've seen a nice upswing, which topped then about here. So that was about 1 to 1.3 years later. Then the markets became more choppy. We had a lot of up and downs until we reached this low here, finally in end of September of 2022, when the market kind of turned around. Shoppiness was, of course, still there. A large slump down again, rising market, and then up to now a final slump down. So I would roughly categorize this as a phase where we see right after the election, at least under Joe Biden, the stock markets performing very well. Then a sideways choppy kind of market phase, still with kind of rising markets, of course. Then we have like something that I like to call volatile up and downs, and then the beginning of a new bull run. Now, if I do the following and do a layover of the S&P 500, how it performed on each week, so this is a weekly chart, on each week under Donald Trump, you'll see the following. We see here, of course, the chart here for Donald Trump goes further to the right because Joe Biden still has, of course, a couple of months left of his current presidency. But we can see here actually this kind of the same pattern under Donald Trump, also the same pattern we've seen under Joe Biden. Also here, we had the markets rising first. Then we had a slump down. Then we had somewhat a little bit more stable phase than under Joe Biden. And then a choppy up and down again, followed by the market slowly regaining strength. A top, a large slump down, and then the beginning of a new bull market. So not one-on-one, but if you compare like certain market periods, I think they are very, very characteristic. Certain market periods like that after 1 to 1.3 years, you seem to have a rather volatile slump down, that in the middle of the presidency, the market seems to find its bottom. That was the same under Donald Trump than it is under Joe Biden. And then again, after building a top for Donald Trump, of course, this was Corona here in 2020. For Joe Biden, currently, it's something else. It's inflation being sticky probably, but you have a rather large slump down. Now, this should continue actually under Joe Biden soon to the north, so with more rising markets until the election that is going to be later this year. If we add the presidency before Donald Trump, which of course was Barack Obama, we kind of see the same pattern again. We have rising markets for 1 to 1.3 years right after the election, a little slump down, market go up again, a little bit of choppiness, one final slump down here, and then finally the market's recovering. Now, bear in mind, of course, that these patterns are a bit general. That doesn't mean, of course, that the S&P 500 on each week, on each day behaves roughly the same. But if we categorize those phases and draw our conclusions from this, the natural thing here to do is to start, if you are not already invested, that is, of course, to buy stocks shortly before the election and hold them for 1 to 1.3 years, because under all three presidencies you had a phase here where the market really didn't do much. There was a lot of up, a lot of down, so you needed a lot of patience actually, especially if you invested in stocks that don't have a high dividend yield, to finally probably get into the green numbers. And then the third thing, in my opinion, that's very characteristic is that under all three presidents so far, we had this final slump down before the markets started to recover again. Here under Barack Obama, it was a bit earlier than under Donald Trump. Under Donald Trump, it was more severe because that was COVID as the black swan event. Under Joe Biden, the kind of event that causes trouble on the markets currently is the sticky inflation in the USA, that the markets do not know when is the Fed finally going to lower interest rates again. So this time around now, what we are seeing probably actually is a pretty good time to invest again, because we see here roughly 27 weeks, that's 190 days before the election of a new president, these new patterns, new bull markets start forming out. So actually it's wise not to buy directly on the election, because the bull market already starts before that, and that would translate that around this area we are right now in the S&P 500, it would be wise to invest in it. And this is of course not only true for the S&P 500, this is also true for Bitcoin. Why is that so? Well, this is because Bitcoin and the S&P 500 are something that we investors like to call correlated. That means when the S&P 500 is moving up, most of the times you'll see Bitcoin also moving up. When the S&P 500, the stock markets are moving down, well, you'll see the price of Bitcoin and in general cryptocurrencies also go down. So if I project this pattern that we've just discovered into the future, what we should see, if this really is the start of a new bull market, we should see for at least 1.5 to maybe 2 years now great opportunities to invest in cryptocurrencies. And this comes along at a time where we just had the Bitcoin halving. This comes along at a time where we finally have spot ETFs where retail investors and institutional investors can invest in without having to take self-custody of the Bitcoin. So everything, in my opinion, really is on green. So if you see the markets, if you see Bitcoin, if you see cryptocurrencies struggling a little bit, then do the following: when in doubt, zoom out and maybe remember this presidential election pattern that I've just showed you. I think it really helps you to put things into perspective. That's it already for today. I hope you enjoyed this little venture into what I call the presidential election pattern and how it's correlated to investing in stocks and investing in cryptocurrencies. If you like the content, leave me a like, subscribe to my channel. I publish a new video on every Thursday. Until we see each other again, happy investing.